You did a really long stint at Third Point, but you didn't, that wasn't a straight line to getting there. So how did you end up there? What was that path like?
After Morgan Stanley, I was working at a fund called DB's Wern. And people kind of forget it because it's a long time ago and DB's Wern blew up. But DB's Wern was like the fund for specialty finance. It was them and Fortress. They were kind of the stars of the market. There were some copycats starting to pop up, but DB's Wern was like the kind of best cream of the crop of specialty finance. I worked for this really great guy named Ray Chan and this other really great guy named Rob Flowers, and I would have stayed there and stayed with them forever. I learned a lot of who I wanted to be from them. I learned a lot of how I wanted to run a business. They were both really incredible talents, but also people. And that kind of gave me a lot of lessons that I took into Third Point. But DB's Wern was going out of business in 2008, not because of the crisis, but because the founder bought a plane with investor capital. Allegedly, there's a bunch of news articles about it, and then paid it back, and there was like controls issues and all that kind of stuff. But we were looking for a place for the team. They were trying to find a place to bring 9 people in the middle of the financial crisis. And that proved too much of a lift, and I ended up getting an offer to start and run the structured credit business at Third Point. I was in my mid-20s. It was pretty incredible. But yeah, no, I never would have left the DB's Wern team had that not happened. And in my mid-20s, I was given the opportunity to start this business at Third Point, and I'll never forget, Dan said, we're going to start you with $200 million. Let's do 100 and see how it goes. And if it goes well, we'll do another 100. And he also said, look, if this goes well, we don't give guarantees here, but you'll make more than you could imagine in your wildest dreams. And if it doesn't go well, you won't be here very long and probably won't even be here for the first guarantee
How
cycle.
old were you at the time?
I think it was 25 or 26. It was pretty wild.
That is crazy. And for the folks listening, what is specialty finance and structured credit? Like, walk us through what those things, what that is.
Yeah, so structured credit is the probably best way to describe it is the securitization of loans, leases. Structured credit is taking a pool of mortgages and chopping them up into a bunch of bonds. Structured credit would be the same thing with auto loans, with personal loans, with credit cards. GM, just for instance, when they sell you a car, they also usually sell you an auto loan or an auto lease. And they take those loans and leases and they drop them into a securitization. Out comes a bunch of bonds that there could be a 1-year AAA bond. There could be a 3-year AAA bond. AAA bonds are bonds rated the highest. There could be bonds that are not AAA. There could be bonds that are not investment grade. And so really, structured credit is the repackaging of loans and leases or contractual obligations. You asked about specialty finance is things like rediscount lending. Rediscount lending means lending to a lender against loans that they have originated. And then it's things like lending to someone who wants to do invoice finance, lending to someone who wants to finance purchase orders. Any loan against a financial asset, in my opinion, would be called specialty finance.
Got it. Okay. So you end up shifting gears. You're obviously now doing structured credit. You're at Third Point. Walk me through that. So obviously the heater was on you from the beginning, like, hey, here's a ton of rope.
For sure.
Like, ton of rope. Let's go. Here's the keys to the kingdom. Like, don't screw it up. How quickly were you rising to the top? You were there for what, 8 years? So I'm assuming it was like pretty high intensity the entire time.
It was insane. I don't even know how to describe it. This guy who had been there a couple years comes up to me my first week and he's like, so I have some good advice for you. And I was like, I'd love to hear it. And he goes, if your first trade doesn't work out, you're not going to be here very long and you're not going to have the rope to do a second. But if it does, the amount of rope that'll give you will just multiply. He was probably right, but obviously I wanted my first trade to work out. I didn't want to lose money day one. But I got there and I just started. It was in the depths of the financial crisis and I just started buying risk. And it could have gone the other way. Maybe I was too naive to think it could have. I don't know. But
do you remember your first trade or how big it was or anything?
INDX 2007 AR1 2A1. Yes, it was 40 million bonds.
Okay.
I remember almost every bond I've ever traded. And what that means is there were loans, mortgage loans, Alt-A mortgage loans, which is between prime and subprime, originated by a bank called IndyMac in 2007, and Group 2 was the non-Fannie and Freddie, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac eligible group of loans, and I think I bought it at around 38 to 39 cents on the dollar. But Yeah, I remember most bonds I've traded. It's like a nice party trick sometimes. After a few drinks, I can tell you about all of them.
That's insane. All right, I'm going to take you up on this though at some point when I get my butt to Austin. Okay, so you're there. Had you ever, because we're going to obviously transition, so you've started Takora Capital. You're obviously just had a massive first close, almost $300 million for your fund two. It's private credit funds. What led to that? And had you raised money at Third Point, or was your first time raising money from investors when you went out to raise fund one?
I mean, I was part of the process at Third Point, but what I would say is I had no idea what the process was like. So I'm at Third Point, I'd get an email from IR, please be in this room at this time. And I'd be in that room at that time and I'd talk about what I did, but I had no idea what starting raising to finalizing raising actually was. Telling investors what you do for 30 minutes and getting them a couple sound bites so that they have the complete picture of what Third Point was doing is very different than today. It is just us, and we are talking for hours about just us, and we're talking about not just what we do, but the infrastructure we're building. It's a very, very different process. So while I would say I was a very small part of fundraising at Third Point, I had no idea what a slog it was.